Good evening. The Georgia General Assembly is working through the night on dozens of bills on this critical crossover day. Welcome to our 1-hour Lawmakers special on day 28 of the Georgia legislative session. Crossover day is when bills must pass in either the House or the Senate to have a chance of becoming law. Of course, there are ways to still get a bill through, and we'll talk about that later in the show. Because we are live, we'll bring you news from the Gold Dome as it happens and interviews with the lawmakers on bills they support. Among those we'll hear from Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who, among other things, will talk about the bill that passed in the Senate to provide an oversight board for district attorneys. He'll also talk about the defeat of the Buckhead cityhood bill. Throughout the show, in the studio to offer background and analysis, two of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's political insiders. Let's start, as always, by heading to the Capitol for a report of the day so far from correspondent Rochelle Ritchie. Hi, Rochelle.
Hi, Donna. Well, I can tell you that the House is now in recess for a dinner, a much-needed dinner break, I should probably say, and will return at around 8:15. Now, earlier in the day, a bill that would allow 17-year-olds to be seen in juvenile court instead of superior court actually passed, as well as the budget. But the big news of the day mainly coming from the Senate. It's crossover day, a busy day for both chambers as they try to pass as many of their bills as they can by the end of today's session. In the Senate, more gambling and education legislation. Senate Resolution 140 would provide a state constitutional amendment allowing sports betting. The resolution would need to be approved by 2/3 majorities in both chambers, and voters would have to approve the constitutional change.
I believe if Georgia wants to, the only fair way to do this is to amend the Constitution, which is what Senate Resolution 140 does.
This latest proposal also distributes the gambling proceeds differently.
55% of the money goes to education, 15% for treating and preventing compulsive gaming, 25% to rural economic development, healthcare, mental health in those areas, and then the 5% for promoting sports events.
Senator Marty Harbin, who opposed an earlier gambling bill, once again rose in opposition.
When we look at sports gambling, there's an addiction issue that's talked about. There's a lot of good things that we see from it, but there's also a lot of issues that are addiction. Even this is that, according, and if y'all remember, I handed out the Illinois Law Review to you to read through. It's interesting is that the addiction rate, even among minorities, are double what it is among Caucasians. Even Jesse Jackson in his Chicago speech on Martin Luther King Day called gambling the new chains of slavery. Youth and kids exposed to gambling are already showing double those of gambling addiction percentage rates.
Multiple amendments were proposed, including making the Hope scholarships need-based instead of merit-based, as well as an amendment that would allow casinos and pari-mutuel wagering, but both failed to make the grade. The resolution failed to meet the 2/3 requirement with a 30-26 vote. And SB 233, a bill that would allow parents a $6,000 voucher to be used to educate their children outside of the public education system.
That could be anything from private schools to homeschooling to virtual schooling. That number represents slightly less than the average QBE allocation, or I should say state funding allocation that we spend on every student in the state of Georgia. Those parents will be able to choose from a list of expenses, approved expenses that are in the bill on lines 42 through 59, and allow them to request funding from the third-party administrator that will administrate these funds to reimburse for those approved expenses.
Opponents of the bill say it will weaken public school funding.
When we look at how this program works across the country, 70 to 80% of the participants are families who would have sent their kids to private school anyway. So what we are in fact doing is we are reallocating money. We are defunding our state education system and sending that money to private schools.
You ruin the schools so that they don't have credibility. You don't give them the money they need to do a basic job, which is on us, and then use that as an excuse to weaken them further.
The bill passed along party lines 33-23. In the House, a lengthy debate on House Bill 30, which changes the definition of anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities.
Democrats argued there is already a definition and other minority or religious groups may feel excluded from additional protections.
By creating a definition for anti-Semitism when anti-Semitic acts are already covered in statute, it begs the question as to why the Georgia Code does not define anti-Black racism or anti-Latino racism or anti-Asian racism. Each of these groups could make the argument that they have been subjected to an increase in acts of violence over the years.
Representative Esther Panich, the only Jewish elected member of the General Assembly, says this bill does nothing of the sorts.
Just to be clear, just because the hate crime law says it's against religion does not mean a swastika would be considered anti-Semitic. A swastika does not go against my religion. There is nothing in the Torah about a swastika. You need a definition to be able to say that a swastika is anti-Semitic. It's as simple as that. Things that you would think would be obvious are not obvious. And I'll get to an example in a moment. But that is all this is, and it has been twisted and contorted into making something it's not, and I don't know why.
The bill passed 136 to 22, and a major milestone as HB 18, which covers the 2023 amended fiscal budget, passed successfully.
I would be remiss not to begin with a few of the places where the House and Senate agreed not only with each other, but with the governor. Full funding for QBE and the midterm adjustment, $35.7 million to the governor's rural workforce housing initiative, $166.7 million for large economic development projects receiving REBA grants for Hyundai and Rivian, $92 million for reinsurance to help keep our health insurance premiums low, and $34.5 million for new public safety radio network for State Patrol and DNR.
And the Senate also passed the amended fiscal year budget 54-1. That bill is now on its way to the governor's desk. And in a committee meeting this morning with House Appropriations Chairman Matt Hatchett, he said that they expect they could have another budget for next year ready within a week. Donna, that is my Capitol Report. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Michelle. We'll see you all throughout the show. For now, joining us in the studio are two of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's hardworking political insiders. Greg Bluestein, a journalist, author, and one of the writers of the Jolt newsletter. He also hosts the podcast Politically Georgia with our other guests, AJC columnist Patricia Murphy, who used to be on Lawmakers, who also writes for the Jolt, too. So thank you so much for both being here. I think we have time for just a quick question before we go back out to Rochelle. And so let's talk about one of the last bills we saw in the House, and that dealt with anti-Semitism, the hate bill that she just mentioned. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, that's a bill that we've been watching carefully. That is a bill that now will define anti-Semitism as a part of the state's hate crime statute. Before, anti-Semitic acts, even acts to threaten or intimidate, were not considered a hate crime in Georgia. That has now, or it looks like it's on the way to being changed. That bill from Republican John Carson and Democrat Esther Panich passed today on the floor of the State House. Really important milestone, I would say, for the Jewish community in particular, and then really for the state of Georgia to really wrap our arms around these kinds of crimes that we've seen happening with increased and more concerning frequency around the state.
And quickly, it took a while to get to this point, didn't it? It didn't look like it may not, it looked looked like it may not make it at one point. Didn't
Yeah, the overall debate over hate crimes has been waged for almost 2 decades now. And this measure in particular gained some traction after anti-Semitic flyers were dumped on the driveways of a number of predominantly Jewish neighborhoods in Sandy Springs and Dunwoody, including State Representative Esther Penich, and including my own house.
Wow, I did not know that. So we got it this far. We'll see how it goes from here in the Senate. But we need to go right now back to the Capitol with Rochelle Ritchie, and she has Majority Leader Chuck F. Strachan.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Donna. I'm here with House Majority Leader Chuck F. Strachan, and we're actually going to talk a little bit about HB 30 as well, but I wanted to first get your thoughts on serving as the House Majority Leader for the first year, really.
Well, thank you, Rochelle. It's so exciting to serve as House Majority Leader representing the Republican caucus. We have so many outstanding members from all over the state, many different issues that are brought up for consideration during the legislative session. And just getting to kind of watch how the process works, help members pass their legislation has been terrific. I've really enjoyed it.
Now, did you have any surprises when you came into this role, like things that happened that you weren't necessarily expecting to be part of the job?
I think part of the Gold Dome is surprises all the time.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, there have been all kinds of new issues that have come up. Certainly, many times members bring in issues that are real passion projects from their respective districts that they want to work on, and I have a great chance to educate myself in a new area of the law, maybe something I haven't learned about in the past.
Yeah, and one of those passionate issues, obviously, HB 30 was just passed in the House. Obviously, it was part of my Capitol Report. Donna and her panel were just talking about it. Give me your thoughts on the passage of this bill, but then also some of the reluctance to support it.
Sure, so anti-Semitism is a real issue facing our nation and our state. I previously carried the anti-hate crimes law and have talked about in the past how the anti-Semitism bill to put in law a definition of anti-Semitism for use in both hate crimes prosecutions and discrimination cases is critical to our state. Republican John Carson, a chairman, carried the bill, and Democrat Esther Penich co-sponsored the bill. So it was a bipartisan measure that was presented here at the Capitol. And I'm very proud of the fact that it passed today with a resounding bipartisan vote. Ultimately, Georgia, as we say, is too great to hate.
Yeah.
When folks are doing terrible things to terrorize victims, but also the entire community, we need to call that out in the law and address it accordingly.
All right, well, thank you so much, House Majority Leader Chuck F. Strachan. I know you have a busy, busy evening ahead, and obviously you guys are on break for dinner, so go get something to eat.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you. All right, Donna, we'll send it back to you.
Thanks so much, Rochelle. We'll see you a little bit later. So let's talk about some of the other things that happened today. And one of them, the constitutional amendment to take sports betting out to the public through an amendment, and it failed to get that 2/3 majority.
Yeah, this was the second time an effort to expand gambling failed in the Georgia General Assembly this year. There's still 2 other options, so it's not a dead issue yet, but it does remind us of how fraught this debate has been, not just this year, but really for 2 decades in Georgia. Any effort to expand gambling has met a lot of opposition.
Yeah, it's amazing that every year it looks like it might be, we're getting closer. Let's talk about what still might be out there in the House.
It looks like something that is more narrowly tailored to focus on sports betting alone. We've seen some other efforts fail that had sports betting plus, either sports betting with some form of horse racing or sports betting plus some kind of casino gambling on top of it. Sports betting alone feels like it might have the best chance of passage. And crucially, they're trying to define sports betting in a way that would make it part of the Georgia lottery. That means it would not require a 2/3 vote to amend the state constitution through referendum. That is a much easier lift than getting a constitutional amendment passed first through the legislature with 2/3 vote and then through an actual popular vote of Georgia voters. So obviously those steps are very complicated. Chief Justice Melton, the former Chief Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court, issued an opinion earlier this year that does seem to really be carrying some water with some members that said you may not actually need that constitutional amendment. If it's a part of the lottery, go for just the majority vote. We've heard concerns that that's going to get all kinds of legal challenges even if you do pass it. But first things first, they're trying to get it through the General Assembly, and that seems like the one that has the best chance so far.
And that's a possibility tonight with the House. And the fact that the money would go into the lottery for education seems to appeal to a lot of the members.
That and the fact that a number of other states have already legalized sports betting, including Tennessee, one of our neighbors. There are already a number of Georgians who already try to bet, especially over Super Bowl and other big events in other states legally. So it's a big issue that is still continuing to roll on. But this year, supporters feel like they have the traction because they have support from Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and also tacit support from Governor Kemp.
Yeah, and actually, House Speaker Burns said he's willing to at least think about it and look at it. So, but we're going to head back to the Gold Dome where Rochelle Ritchie has Senator Kim Jackson of Stone Mountain. Hi, Rochelle.
Hi, Donna. Yes, I'm standing here with Senator Kim Jackson, and one of the things that I wanted to get into, Senator Jackson, has to do with SB 140, which you have been completely against. Tell us why.
Yeah, that's right. So SB 140 would ban any type of gender-affirming surgeries for youth, along with hormone replacement therapy for any youth who is gender divergent or trans youth. And so I'm opposed to that because trans children are greatly at risk of suicide. And so we know that when they get gender-affirming care, that helps them feel better about who they are and helps them with their mental health. This is fundamentally about their well-being and mental health. So that's why I'm opposed to it.
How concerned are you that this is going to make its way to the governor's desk?
Yeah, you know, the governor early on said he didn't want to do cultural wars. And this is a cultural war issue. So I'm hoping that we actually won't even see it tonight. The reality is there are only about 50 or so students in the entire state of Georgia who are in need of this type of care. And so this just feels like bullying against a small minority group of people for a cultural war. So I'm very, very hopeful that we just will see this all die today.
And speaking of cultures, prior to us coming to the show, we were talking a little bit about tuition for students that are Afghan and Ukrainian. Tell us more about that. It's something you just kind of introduced a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. So I just actually introduced a bill that would allow for in-state tuition for any special immigrant who comes here and is resettled in Georgia. So we're talking about folks who helped us in the war from Afghanistan. We're talking about Ukrainians and, of course, refugees. I have the great privilege of representing Clarkston, which has a large refugee resettlement. And so we want to make sure that folks have access to education, and in-state tuition is one of the ways that helps make that possible for them.
Do you think that you might find some opposition to that as far as helping people that are migrating to the United States when there's such this call for action when it comes to American students being able to afford a college education?
Sure, absolutely. There is some resistance to it, but there is also a bipartisan. My bill is bipartisan. There's a match on the House side that's also bipartisan. And the reality is this is just giving people a chance, right? We're saying you helped us as Americans in wars. We recognize that you're really important to our economy, so we want to help you get education.
All right, Senator Kim Jackson, thank you so much for joining us on Lawmakers.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Donna, back to you.
Thank you. So let's talk about this a little bit. Senator Jackson said she hopes she doesn't see this bill come, HB 140 with gender dysphoria. What are you thinking?
Well, earlier in the program, we heard from Majority Leader Chuck Obstruction saying his job is full of surprises. Well, this night is full of surprises. Things are very fluid right now. But this bill was supposed to be debated hours ago. It was 15th on the schedule in the Georgia Senate. It was abruptly pulled. One of the reasons why is conservatives feel like it doesn't go far enough into restricting transgender surgery, gender reassignment surgery for transgender youth, gender affirming surgery, I should say. So it's a big debate. We don't know where it's going to land, but we know that a lot of the energy on culture wars issues, a lot of the social conservative energy is being funneled into this bill because we're not seeing new restrictions on abortion, new expansions for guns, a revival of religious liberty, a lot of those other social issues we've seen in the past.
And that we expected, right, going into this?
Yeah, absolutely. We really weren't, to be honest with you, quite sure what to expect from this session because we have a new House Speaker, we have a new Lieutenant Governor, we have a Governor Kemp going into his second term without a major agenda other than the economic bread and butter issues that he talked about coming into session. And so we were waiting to see where are these bills going to be going, particularly on abortion. I feel like we did think we would see a number of bills looking to come in after the 6-week two-week abortion ban went into effect, what other areas could social conservatives come in and start to restrict even further? We have seen that in a number of other states. We just haven't seen that here in Georgia. So to Greg's point, it's such a really smart analysis that all of the typical energy that we see dispersed among a number of other social conservative bills feels like it's all getting poured into this gender identity question of medical care for transgender youth. However, I think the issue is so little understood. To Senator Jackson's point, how many children are we even talking about? Is it 50? Is it 500? Is it 5,000? You know, Senator Jackson says it's 50. I don't think people really have their arms around this issue quite yet, and so it's hard to see exactly where even the energy and the Center for Conservatives is on this. Does it need to be more conservative, less conservative, more restrictive? We're going to find out here tonight.
Okay, so we'll see how that one goes. I want to talk quickly about SB 233, the Georgia Promise Scholarship. That's $6,000 scholarship for parents to use for children, private schools, virtual schools, home schools. It went in the Senate today, and tell us about it. Back and forth. A lot of debate against it.
Yeah, we're talking about another issue that we've talked about on this program for years, and that we've talked about under the Gold Dome for years, that critics say would take money away from public school education and funnel it into private school. It is a debate that especially conservatives say is needed. Especially those who feel like their public school systems are failing them, and the Senate is taking another stab at it.
Yeah, it is interesting because it's really called the voucher bill by some people, who are really against it, that this money is like we're just handing them the money and they can do whatever they want with it, in terms of an education, which is on the pro side. That's exactly what they want.
Yeah, people on the pro side want that flexibility, but the real criticism we heard tonight from Democrats was there is no means testing for this. There is no specificity even to say that you can't use it for tutoring. You don't even have to spend it all in the year that it is sent to you. And so Democrats are looking at the very least to tighten it up, make it more specific, really tailor it to disabled students in very specific communities, needs-based, but that is not the bill that has come out of the Senate. We'll have to see what the State House does with it.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll be watching that one. We're going to return to the Capitol now, where Rochelle Ritchie has an interview with Representative Misha Maynor of Atlanta.
Ready. Hi, Donna. Yes, I'm here with Representative Misha Maynor. So thank you so much for coming out to speak with us, first of all, because I know it's super busy and this is you all's dinner hour. I do want to get your reasoning behind supporting the bill that would allow oversight of district attorneys. I think you're probably the only Democrat that actually supports that bill. Tell us why.
You know, there was a lot of information going around that this was a Republican partisan bill, but truthfully, they're one of the only elected officials that have no oversight. So legislators have oversight. Everyone has oversight except for prosecutors. You know, they mentioned some things during the debate saying you could go to the AG's office, you could go to the bar. The problem with if a lay voter went to the bar to complain, you really need to know legal terminology to even file a bar complaint. To say you can elect them another district attorney the next go round, that doesn't work because most of the time a lay voter has no idea what prosecutors are dropping. And so to have oversight is important. The President of the United States has oversight, and in particular counties, especially counties that I represent, crimes against women are not being prosecuted.
Give us another reason why you think that is so important for the DA to be, because I know that Senator Rainey Robertson had mentioned the Ahmaud Arbery case and how that DA needed to have some oversight based off of comments that were made. Do you think that this is also a reaction to some of the bias that we've seen play out in cases that are here in Georgia, even in those that are national?
You know, I do not think that this bill has come forward as a political bill. This is not a political bill. This is a bill that protects citizens of counties. District attorneys are right now the chief law enforcement officer for a state. So they get to say right then and there if a crime is a crime or if it should be prosecuted. One big problem I have, especially if you're talking about crimes against women, If a police officer does an investigation and says this is a crime, instead of the police officer going to the judge to ask for a warrant, they skip that process and they go straight to the district attorney. And the district attorney, because district attorneys are numb to crimes against women. So the district attorney will say, no, I'm not going to prosecute that. And then the police officer never even goes to the judge for the warrant. So then the police officer goes back to the victim and says, I'm sorry, prosecutor said they're not going to prosecute it.
Yeah.
It's nothing I can do. My hands are tied.
And now, before I let you go, there is one more bill that I want to ask you about. This bill was actually introduced, and it allows students to be able to, college students to be able to get their transcripts, even though they may owe money to the university. I've had friends that have personally ran into that issue and couldn't get their college transcripts just to even apply for a grad program. Why is that bill so important for ensuring that students and people are able to further their education or even go after the jobs that they want?
You know, right now we have a workforce development problem, and if we are not allowing people to further their education, to get a degree, to have a better job, then this bill will solve that problem.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Representative Misha Maynard, for joining us. All right, Donna, sending it back to you.
Thanks so much, Rochelle. So let's talk about the fact that she's one of the few Democrats who was in favor of this prosecutorial oversight. I don't even think I'm the DA bill. She is one of the few Democrats in favor of it.
Yes, Representative Maynard, we have started to really watch her carefully. She is so interesting. She is not afraid to go against her party on issues where she really feels like she has the point of view to be casting the right vote. This is a really great example. Representative Maynard has spoken extensively about being the victim of stalking. She has talked about her efforts to have her stalker brought to justice. Very hard for her to press charges against him, then to have a prosecutor take those charges seriously, to bring it to court. And so this is an area that she says she has not just personal experience, she now gets contacted by other victims of domestic abuse, domestic violence, and stalking because she's taken a public stand. She's tried to help them in many cases, and they've run into the same problems.
Yeah, prosecutorial. I got it right. Tell me what your feelings are about this.
Well, it's such an interesting issue because it's bounced around the Capitol the last few years, but this year it's taken on important precedent because of the national attention on Georgia, as District Attorney Fonnie Willis of Fulton County is looking into Donald Trump and his efforts to shape the 2020 election. And so it's being bound up. It's inextricably tied with Fonnie Willis, even though the sponsors say it has nothing to do with the way she's handling that probe into the former president.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We're going to talk to, I have an interview with the Lieutenant Governor about that. So coming up, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, his first crossover day, in charge of the gavel in the Senate. We'll talk about that and more in just a moment.
The defendants are as they come before them, and we need to make sure the data is current. Also give some authority to district administrative judges to assist all classes within their court, within their district.
Lawmakers is made possible by Georgia Farm Bureau. With over 80 years of helping everyone understand the importance of agriculture in our state. After all, ag is Georgia's #1 industry. Food and fiber production represents over $74 billion in output of Georgia's strong economy. The Georgia Farm Bureau legislative team works to represent producers across Georgia at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
Here's what's new this month with Passport.
Kirsten had a lot of courage. She fought for Black culture.
They could have killed you. You're exactly what we need right now. Oh my God.
What is this?
She was poisoned.
These and all your favorite shows are available with Passport. Support your PBS station and stream more with Passport on the PBS app.
We care about things that affect the lives of every American.
We are there at the front lines
to get to the heart of what really matters in every issue.
This country has not seen this in 80 years.
This extraordinary moment in American history.
You're making such a huge impact.
Trust is at the heart of what we do.
One of the easiest ways to support GPB is to become a monthly GPB sustainer. Your monthly support continues automatically month after month and supports not only the great programming that you love on GPB, but also our efforts in the community. GPB is committed to provide a trusted space for lifelong learning on the air, digitally and in person all across Georgia. All this is made possible with your monthly support. And we can't do it without you, so please donate right now at gpb.org/give. And thanks.
The Georgia Senate is back in session this evening on this crossover day, and they just had a vote on something. We'll find out about it in just a moment. Welcome back to Lawmakers. I'm Donna Lowry. And now I want to get to my interview with Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who is presiding over his first crossover day as president of the Senate. It's a far different perspective than during his 10 years as a member of the Senate. Earlier today, I asked him about a couple of bills, but I started by asking him how he prepared for a day with more than 60 bills on the rules calendar.
Well, you script, your first 20, make sure you get the priorities, of the Senate, and the leadership and all the things that I want to see get done in the Senate. We've already passed over to the House, and then from there, we'll table them after lunch and then bring up the ones. And I always remind people, it's a 2-year process. So, whatever doesn't get done this year is still alive for next year.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
That's right. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
The Senate passed a bill to create an oversight board for the state's district attorneys. What's your response to those who say it's an attempt for conservatives to rein in progressive DAs, including Fulton County's DA, who has an ongoing investigation of former President Donald Trump?
I think that there's several DAs that have come under fire, and particularly I know the one over in Clark County has been one that has really brought on a lot of the issues that are trying to be addressed in this prosecutor oversight committee, but there's also some DAs in all regions of the state that have not fulfilled what I think is their duty as elected officials there, and so this is a mechanism to call them to task on it, and I think it's the right move by Senator Robertson. We have it for our judges, something similar with the JQC. And I think it will have favorable consideration over in the House when they take it up over there.
Okay, you campaigned in favor of Buckhead cityhood. What are your feelings now that some of your fellow Republicans have soundly shot it down?
Well, I campaigned in favor of giving them a voice. I think there's legitimate issues that were being brought up as far as from a crime perspective, as well as from the lack of services that some feel like they were receiving there in that area of the state, and I'm all for allowing people the right to vote, and I've always been a proponent of that. Where we're talking about city hoods or talking about gambling, I've always said you ought to give people the ability to vote on things. However, we let the debate happen in the Senate, and the Senate voted it down, and so therefore, the Senate has spoken, and we're gonna move on from there.
How long do you think we're going to go tonight?
How long would you like to go, Donna? I think it could be a late night, but who knows? Everybody might decide that they might buy into my 2-year process talk that I always tell people and say they don't need any of this legislation this evening. So we'll see what happens, but it'll be an interesting night either way.
Well, I was into wrapping it up early, but it doesn't look like it's going to go that way. Let's talk about a couple of things. He mentioned the DA in Athens, Clark County. Excuse me, Deborah Gonzalez. You had a chance to talk to her.
Yeah, I interviewed DA Gonzalez last week as these bills were really starting to move forward. And she said that the idea of DA oversight from the General Assembly is not oversight, it's overreach. That these are local DAs who have been elected by their voters because of the way they're prosecuting these crimes, because of what they're choosing to prioritize or deprioritize, not in spite of it. So she is somebody who campaigned as an extremely progressive DA, made it very clear what she was planning to prosecute in a tough manner, other types of things she was not going to prosecute. She said especially after the abortion bill was enacted, the 6-week abortion ban, she said, we are not going to prosecute people under this bill. This is not going to be a priority for my office. That's the type of statement that really got Republican lawmakers very angry and upset. And so she is really getting a lot of the focus of these DA bills because she is in the home county of where two of the bill sponsors are from. And so that's why most of the focus is on her. But there are a number of other progressive DAs around the state. A number, particularly of women of color, have been elected as DAs. They would say they were elected because of who they are, because of how they are prosecuting those crimes, and it's their voters who have the oversight over them, not the General Assembly.
Yeah, and then we have the two bills, House and Senate, similar too. So they really want this.
Very similar, and yes, they really want this.
Yeah.
Because not only do members of DA Gonzalez's hometown represent, but also Governor Kemp lives in that district, and he has made this an early issue of his own. So we've heard Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and Governor Kemp both voice their support for this issue. So it is on the fast track to happen. We're not sure if the Senate bill or the House bill will emerge, but we have two very similar bills, both moving at breakneck speed through the State House and State Senate.
Okay, let's talk about the other thing I talked to him about, and that's Buckhead cityhood. And he said, all I wanted to do was give people the chance to vote, but it was soundly defeated.
Yeah, and so we were all looking to see when Burt Jones brought that to the state Senate, did he know that he had the votes to pass it? Did he know that the votes were there to defeat it? It was one of those few times, although it's increasingly, we're starting to see this more and more out of Burt Jones' state Senate. We just didn't know how it was going to go until it was debated on the floor of the state Senate. We had a pretty good idea, but things can always kind of go a little loopy once you're trading horses down there on the Senate floor. So he brought that bill, the Buckhead bill, to a debate, and I mean, it lost by a lot. 10 Republicans, very senior Republicans, came out against that bill. And I would say by debating that openly on the Senate floor and having that huge defeat, that just crushed its chances, I would say, for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and then we heard from one of the big proponents of the bill in an email.
Yeah, that was Bill White and the Buckhead City Coalition, basically saying they're calling it quits for now. And one of the reasons, what Patricia just mentioned, 10 Republican senators in the chamber that was supposed to back that, that at least there was more support in the Senate than the House, 10 Republican senators voted against it. But the other big issue is Governor Kemp. His administration, his executive counsel, David Dove, issued a 2-page memo that outlined nearly a dozen legal and constitutional questions about this measure, including what it would do to bond obligations, billions of dollars of bond obligations, and what students in the proposed city of Buckhead, where they could go to school. A lot of questions remained unanswered. They just pointed out those questions, and that helped seal its fate.
Yeah. So we said last year when it didn't make it to the floor that it was over, and I think right now we think it's over. Still could come back.
It feels pretty over to me. It feels pretty over to me.
All right.
I asked Bill White 2 years ago, where are the kids in Buckhead going to go to school? Where are mom and dad what curb are they dropping them off at to go to school on day one? Where are Buckhead kids going to school? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, you can't create a new school system, and they can't go to APS schools. That was kind of news to the Buckhead City Committee 2 years ago, and they never resolved the issue. You cannot bring forward, you certainly can't pass bills with those kind of huge, massive unanswered questions, and that was just one of about a dozen that the governor outlined.
Okay, so I'm hearing that there was a bill that just passed that will give licenses to the military spouses to be able to SB 195, I'm hearing. So the spouses, and as a military dependent for years, my dad was in the military, it allows the spouses of the military people to have a chance to work in the areas in Georgia. So we do know about that. I do want to ask about the budget right now. The mid-year budget did pass today. Less money when it came to property, the property tax relief that actually the governor wanted, that we all expected.
Yeah, they rolled back some of the governor's initiatives, but for the most part, there was consensus between the House, Senate, and the governor. And it's a lot easier to have consensus when you're talking about a surplus of more than $6 billion. In times of plenty, it's a little easier to get on the same page. What they're worried about, though, of course, is going into the future when they have to do a little more belt tightening in the next few budgets.
Yeah, I know we're going to do our budget show, 1-hour budget show here on Monday, so we'll talk more about it. But now the mid-year is at least moved. We're at a point where it's now for the governor. Now we've got to work on the fiscal budget for next year.
Yeah, now they've got to get their arms around the big budget instead of the baby budget. So they're going to do the big budget. And to Greg's point, right now, they still are working with this really wonderful scenario of having very, very large surpluses here in the state. A lot of that was because of federal funding that just flooded into the state as a result of COVID relief. But to Greg's point, we heard last year, Blake Tillery, the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, just said something at the end of the term. We see storm clouds on the horizon. And so we know with pension obligations, other outlays that are sort of out-year outlays that are just waiting out there for the state budgeters to have to deal with, those types of things are coming around the budget. And so they're going to have to start to really wrestle with those issues. And so we'll start to see a large part of that in the upcoming full year budget.
Anything to add?
Well, this was the centerpiece of Governor Kemp's reelection campaign, right? They had a fundamental difference with Democrat Stacey Abrams over how they spend that budget. And what a big portion of his budget proposal is giving back an estimated $2 billion of that surplus to taxpayers in the form of property tax relief, whereas Democrats are pushing for a different use of that money towards higher teacher pay raises and other initiatives, such as expanding the Medicaid program.
So we've got some time here. I want to talk about what isn't expected to come through tonight. Some things that you guys thought we might see tonight that we're not seeing.
Yeah, well, one big proposal was anything on abortion, on gun expansions, and on religious liberty. Those are sort of three hot button issues we've been watching here for years. Anytime it comes up, it sparks a lot of debate. All three of measures involving all three of those issues have so far been bottled up in committee. There's always a chance, they could be tacked on to other pieces of legislation, but so far it doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
Yeah, I said at the beginning we'd explain how things can get tacked on to other legislation, how tonight isn't, the end of everything. Explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, so Sine Die, day 40, will be the day when you can really see a whole lot of Christmas tree bills show up on the calendar. That means you have your main bill and then everything else starts to get tacked on like ornaments at the very last minute. Crossover day is when you start to really see which bills are going to need a major resuscitation, a rescue effort on Sine Die if they're not getting across on crossover day. But if you don't have the juice, if you don't have the well of power or goodwill to ask for a special favor after crossover day, you really need to have had your bills buttoned up in regular order by the end of the day today in order to hope for final passage by the end of the year.
And the end of the day today could be tomorrow. So we'll see. So we're going to take a break and then we'll be right back with our special 1 hour Lawmakers on crossover day.
I know. I yield the roll.
Yeah, good thought. Good thought, Senator. Good thought, Senator.
Lawmakers is made possible by Georgia Farm Bureau. With over 80 years of helping everyone understand the importance of agriculture in our state. After all, ag is Georgia's #1 industry. Food and fiber production represents over $74 billion in output of Georgia's strong economy. The Georgia Farm Bureau legislative team works to represent producers across Georgia at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
Here's what's new this month with Passport.
Kirsten had a lot of courage. She fought for Black culture.
They could have killed you. You're exactly what we need right now. Oh my God.
What is this?
She was poisoned.
These and all your favorite shows are available with Passport. Support your PBS station and stream more with Passport on the PBS app.
We care about things that affect the lives of every American.
We are there at the front lines
to get to the heart of what really matters in every issue.
This country has not seen this in 80 years.
This extraordinary moment in American history.
You're making such a huge impact.
Trust is at the heart of what we do.
One of the easiest ways to support GPB is to become a monthly GPB sustainer. Your monthly support continues automatically month after month and supports not only the great programming that you love on GPB, but also our efforts in the community. GPB is committed to provide a trusted space for lifelong learning on the air, digitally and in person all across Georgia. All this is made possible with your monthly support. And we can't do it without you, so please donate right now at gpb.org/give. And thanks.
Welcome back to Lawmakers. I'm Donna Lowry on our special 1 hour crossover day special. But we're going to right now go back to the Gold Dome where Rochelle Ritchie is with another interview person. This time it's Senator Randy Robertson.
Hi, Donna. Yes, as you mentioned, I'm here with State Senator Randy Robertson, who's taking the time out of his very, very busy schedule because there's a lot going on right now in the Senate to come and speak with us. So really, I wanted to talk to you because you were the one that pretty much introduced this bill that would give the prosecutorial oversight for DAs. And I want to get into why you were so adamant at having that bill go through.
Yeah, this journey started about 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago, when we had some issues in my district where we had a district attorney get elected into office and basically decided that the laws didn't apply to him. And then at the same time, just prior to that, we had an issue with a district attorney down in Brunswick. I think everybody remembers where we had a young man out for a jog and he was murdered, and the district attorney down there we felt wasn't doing their job. And then we had an incident here in Fulton County with the previous district attorney where some law enforcement officers were charged for crimes without what we felt like was due process. And so we started looking at the circumstances around all these things and realized that there was a gap in the criminal justice system where all of our judges had oversight, all of our law enforcement had oversight, but our district attorneys did not. So we felt that it was time that we address that issue. And so myself and a friend of mine over in the House got very aggressive about it and put some legislation out there, and so far this session we've had success with it.
Now, prior to speaking with you, I spoke with Representative Misha Maynor, and one of the questions that I didn't get to ask her that I'm going to ask you is why do you think that outside of Representative Maynor, Democrats were so reluctant to supporting this bill?
You know, I really don't know. I know there's been some, there's been a little bit of talk around the edges that whether the bill was was focused on just dealing with Democrat district attorneys. But the ironic part of it is when this bill was initially dropped, there were Democrats in the House that actually dropped a bill that says a lot of the same things the bill we're carrying today said. So, I really don't know. I think one of the problems that we have in the DA's office around the state, and it's something else we need to address, is we have to remove politics from the criminal justice system. And I think possibly by making our district attorneys nonpartisan will be a solution to do that, so that citizens are voting on prosecutors based on resumes and experience and not on what party they're affiliated with.
All right, State Senator Randy Robertson, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, we're going to let you go so you can go back in the Senate.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. And Donna, we'll send it right back to you.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. So we talked about some bills some issues we thought would come up, and the voting bills. Let's talk about the status on some of the voting bills.
Well, one of the bills that we have not seen movement on that we were thinking we might was the effort to address runoffs in the state of Georgia. Obviously, after our consecutive runoffs in 2020, 2022, there was conversation about whether maybe this is the time to look at runoffs and either reduce the threshold to 45% to trigger a runoff or just to get rid of runoffs altogether. That bill has not got a lot of press attention, but it has not gotten a lot of traction in either house. So we'll have to see if that gets any sort of last-minute movement here on crossover day.
There's still a possibility of some other bills, though, where the Republicans are really trying to tighten up some things.
There is, and there's a language in one bill that passed that would eliminate drop boxes in Georgia after Democrats were worried about a provision that would require the live streaming of all these drop boxes. There's another that would allow more mass challenges of voter addresses. So there's a number of election-related legislative bills that are still kind of bouncing around out there. But I really am surprised that the runoff bills didn't get more traction either, because I know we as Georgians are very tired of those extended runoffs. We didn't have a 9-week runoff this time. We only had a 4-week, but still, 4 weeks is a long time.
Certainly a lot of voter fatigue that we thought that people would, that would be a big issue this time around. Just not seeing it, right?
Just not seeing it. Well, I always tend to think that if you are working with a group of lawmakers who have just been elected under the current rules, they are very reluctant to change those rules because all of them are sitting in their seats by way of the laws that are there today. So change those rules, and I think they start to wonder if that would have any unintended consequences on their own races. And so that's just not something that they've been willing to really start to dig into.
Yeah, it's been a different session. How would you describe it?
Well, we have a complete new leadership class, right? We heard from Majority Leader Chuck Efstration. We just heard from Randy Robertson, who's also a member of Senate leadership. Burt Jones is new. The House Speaker John Burns is new. So I think it's also a session where leaders are trying to feel their way around their leadership style. We're seeing things in the Senate we don't often see, which is big bills coming up and failing. Usually we see that it's very rare. You know, we only see a bill fail when it's a big surprise. In this case, we've known that a lot of the bills that are coming up would end up failing, but that's Burt Jones's leadership style. He's okay with bringing up bills, even if they're doomed.
Yeah, the Senate has always been seen as the more conservative of the two. Definitely true this year.
Yes, it's absolutely true this year. One thing that's very, very different is the schedule. We have not seen this frenetic changing of the schedule mid-session. They set a schedule, 40-day schedule, at the very beginning of the session. Work Monday through Thursday, Friday committee day or day off, and then and so on and so on. That has not changed. That has added to the level of predictability that just feels so strange right now in the down at the state capitol. I would say also along the lines of Greg, we're still waiting to see how the chambers are interacting with each other. We talked to a veteran lobbyist down there today, and he said, you just don't feel the hate right now. He said the hate is gone. And he was talking about the incredible antipathy typically that we see between the state House leadership and the state Senate leadership, even when they're in the same parties. And then I think we all agreed, well, give them some time. You know, they have not quite had a chance to come to blows yet, but we're just not seeing that same tug of war quite yet between the two chambers and their power centers. But I think they're still trying to figure out where their power centers are in each of their own chambers still.
Yeah, one of the things I'm just hearing is that the House Rules Committee is going to meet at 8 p.m. tonight. So there are things to come. Any guesses?
Well, sports betting is one big guess. They've already knocked off a few of the major bills, but look, you know, they could add on 20, 30 bills at 8 p.m. and it wouldn't be unprecedented. I've had crossover days that have gone well into the wee hours of the next morning, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was a late night.
Yeah, what are you thinking? Anything for you?
Definitely sports betting, and then the wild cards. You know, we always know that something is going to come up, and then we'll have to start pouring through our notes and say, wait, what is that? What are they talking about? So I think we're just waiting for the surprises, Donna.
Okay, so do either of you have any idea how the Democrats are feeling right now about things? I know earlier today, Minority Leader Beverly had a brief press conference, and he wasn't happy with some things. I don't know if you heard anything about that.
Yeah, look, there's a number of measures that Democrats are upset about, including the budget, including the lack of a full expansion of Medicaid, including the prosecutorial oversight bill that we've been talking a lot about. But they also can claim some victories, including the doom of Buckhead cityhood. That was an issue that Democrats united against, and they joined with those 10 Republican senators. So they've had some wins, but it's the party in the minority, so it's very hard to operate when you're not in power in the state capitol.
And the Democrats have supported the sports betting bill.
Yeah, well, the sports betting bill also is one of those bills that is splitting the caucuses, splitting the Republicans, which I think is an especially interesting piece of the dynamic down there. Also from Democrats, they just are not able to get traction on the bills that are nearest and dearest to them: gun safety, abortion expansions, the things that they would really like to be doing, Medicaid expansion. And so they're really working around the edges and trying to pick off the individual issues where they can find that Republican co-sponsor who can help them lead kind of more tailored, discrete issues across the finish line.
I thought it was interesting, 2 Democrats in the Senate had their bills go through. Senator Josh McLaurin he said he's been down there 5 years, excuse me, first bill. And then we also, Jason Estevez, Senator Estevez, he had his first bill today.
And Nabila Islam as well.
And Nabila Islam.
Yes.
Yep. So they're having some success,
right,
yes.
on individual bills. So that is good.
Yeah, we saw in the House State Representative Scott Holcomb, who's had a number of bipartisan bills. He had another one today. And so there is an opportunity for bipartisan consensusship. And, you know, it happens more often than we think sometimes.
Okay. Well, we're going to go back to Rochelle Ritchie to give us a wrap-up as we finish up the show. Hi, Rochelle.
Well, hi, Donna. It's still a very, very busy night down here at the Capitol, and it's going to go for quite some time. And we just learned that the House, I think, rules calendar, they're going to start that up at 8 o'clock in the morning. So not, so the members are not going to get a lot of sleep, obviously, tonight. But we spoke with a couple of senators as well as House representatives. And what was really nice is that obviously there's a lot of division around some bills, but there's also a lot of consensus around others, such as the prosecutorial oversight. And of course, I'm sure that Dems are still hoping to get something done when it comes to Medicare expansion, as I was listening to your guests, but that seems to continue to be an uphill battle. So we'll be right back here tomorrow to break it all down once again. But Donna, I'm going to send it back to you.
And we'll see how late it goes. Thank you so much for everything, Rochelle. I want to get your final thoughts on the day and where we're going tonight.
Well, now we've got the march. After tonight, we've got the march to Sine Die, where we've got to kind of do all this all over again, but in the span of fewer days. And so there's going to be a lot of negotiation between the House and Senate over which measures should pass, which pieces of language should go into which bills. But there'll be a lot more headlines to come.
Your final thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think we've already seen some really important developments. The Buckhead City bill, I think you really cannot overstate how important that was. To see that defeated on the state Senate floor, it just really puts that issue to bed for now. I think coming up, we're going to see some bills that Governor Kemp has been pushing that are really quite consensus-driven. Tax rebates, property tax cuts, teacher pay raises, law enforcement pay raises. So Governor Kemp is looking at a rather consensus driven agenda, particularly with the budget, and so that I think we'll see the final results of that by Sine Die.
Okay, so the three of us are headed back over there after we finish this, right? And we'll see how long it goes. I want to thank you both for being here. It's always great. Back for Sine Die, maybe? Huh?
Definitely.
All right. That does it for Lawmakers today. We'll be back tomorrow for Legislative Day 29. Have a good night.
Senate lift Senate Bill 66 from the table.
The Senator has requested that Senate Bill 66 be removed from the table. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 66 by Senator Hickman of the 4th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 15.